Karen Zalewski, Wildzunas, Commercial Division, Berkshire Hathaway, Blake Realtors, Associate Broker.
So we have KZW in the house, or at the hub, I should say.
The hub.
Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to start off by a quote that I heard someone say once, which was, women that really change the game are always the ones that no one knows what to do with. And I immediately thought of you because you are changing the game and have changed the game for women in business in so many different areas. But this year you were named one of the female leaders in the Capital Region by the Albany Business Review. You've won Women of Excellence for the Albany Regional Chamber of Commerce, the YWCA, Schenectady County Chamber of Commerce, Executive of the Year, and so many more accomplishments. But let's really bring it back to your childhood and really coming up in a working class family, from what I understand.
I would say that from my standpoint, I grew up in the town of Colony. I went to South Colony High School, and I have 3 sisters. My parents were very good Catholics. They had 4 girls in 6 years. And we lived in a 3-bedroom, barely 3-bedroom, I think it was probably 1,100 square feet, with 1 bathroom. And, my father learned very quickly that he had to put the toilet seat down at night or he was digging one of his kids out of the toilet. So, we started from very humble beginnings. My father was an electrician, and he was not always working. There were a lot of times that he would be laid off, and, we would have to, add powdered milk to water in order for us to get milk. So, went off to college. I paid for college myself. Met my first husband in college, and we got married right after college and moved to the state of Virginia. So I did that in my early 20s.
So being native born and then going to an area that you might not have known as many people in Virginia and kind of starting that family, what did that look like for you?
So my first husband was an Arlington County police officer. We got married and moved into an apartment in Arlington, and soon I realized that, I think we need to save money and we got to buy a house. So it's extremely expensive to live in Arlington County, and anywhere inside the Beltway is very expensive. So we decided that we were going to move outside the Beltway, so we moved approximately 28 miles outside of Washington, D.C. proper, and purchased a house. And, we purchased a house. I got pregnant with my first child, and we were the perfect little American family. He was a police officer, and he worked shift work, and he made good money. We lived very comfortably.
And at that time, did you feel like your purpose in life was to be a stay-at-home mom? What did that look like for you at that time?
So what it looked like for me was I got into banking, and I could work in 1981. I could go to work for a bank and make $10 an hour part-time.
Before I was born.
So it was very lucrative for me to be in banking. I didn't need any benefits, so my husband carried all the benefits. So all I did is I would go into work, and I would work 3 days a week. And I had a share with a neighborhood girl that had the same situation. So I'd work 3 days one week, and she'd work 3 days the following week, and we would share watching each other's kids. So I didn't pay for daycare, and it worked out really well. And then I had my second child, and continued to do that. I actually had my second child, and at the time I was pregnant with him, I wanted to work until the very last second. My due date was on January 5th. I will never forget this. And 2 days before Christmas, whatever that Friday was, I can't remember exactly the day, but it was, he told me I could not come back because he was afraid he was going to have to deliver the baby in the bank, and said, "You are going to have this child any day." And I was like, no. Now, I worked in Washington, D.C. I lived in Dale City, Virginia, and the hospital was in Fairfax. So Fairfax Hospital, largest hospital in Northern Virginia. So if he had to drive me in rush hour from Washington to Fairfax Hospital, it could have taken anywhere from an hour to
You'd be
possibly
delivering-
3. And he did not want, he would say, I'm not delivering no baby in my car. So needless to say, he made me go out on maternity leave early, which was a predicament for me because he wasn't born until January 18th.
What did you do with all that time?
So yeah, I got larger, and then I had him, and in that time frame, you had 6 weeks, and if you weren't back to work in 6 weeks, they did not have to hold your job. So I was making I thought, good money. It was a great gig. I only had to work a couple days a week. I was making $10 an hour, and I think minimum wage at the time was probably $3. So I was making far beyond minimum wage, and it was a great setup. So I went back to work before I actually got cleared from the doctors, and I retained my job, and I kept working. And then a few months down the road, my husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore. Didn't want the whole, house, 2 kids. He said, "Go to New York. I don't want to be married anymore." So. So I did.
That's devastating.
I went off to New York. I don't even remember. I was 24, 25 years old, 2 little kids. I drove up to New York. I didn't have enough money at the time to pay for the tolls. Back then, you didn't have Easy Pass. You had to pay for the tolls. So I had to get off in, I think it was Catskill. I think I got off in Catskill and had to take Route 9 to my mother's. And my sister met me there. My mother had already been divorced from my father at that time. And we didn't tell anybody I was coming because it was kind of like I felt like I failed. I did something wrong. He doesn't want to be married anymore. It was this terrible situation I was in. But long story short, I got over it. And the woman I worked with said, "You have 2 weeks. You need to be back in your house in 2 weeks because if I'm not, then it's considered abandonment." And him being a law enforcement person knew this. So my very, very good friend that was actually my boss told me get my butt back to D.C. and get my butt back in that house, which I did. And he basically came back and said, "Well, we can work on it." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." So he said, "It's not going to work." So I went to talk to an attorney. So the first attorney I went to talk to basically told me that, this is 1985, mind you. He said, "You need to do more for him because he has a very stressful job and he is dealing with life and death issues every single day. So you need to make sure that you're helping him, like iron his shirts." This is the attorney is telling me this.
Be the homemaker.
So, that is, and I was like, no, this isn't happening for me. So I had a friend that lived across the street from me, and she was like, "I'm getting you an attorney that knows what to do." So I went to an attorney out of Old Town Alexandria, and she basically said, "Yeah, this is not happening." So I ended up getting divorced, and basically I got everything in the divorce. I had a very good attorney. I even got his motorcycle. So he went off into the sunset, and I had the 2 kids to raise. So I ended up going to work full time and in banking at that time, First American Bank of Washington, D.C.
But that didn't stop you. So you continued on, and even as a single parent, you made sure that your responsibilities to your career were still a priority, but your children were the most important. And can you tell us a little bit about what that looked like in those early stages, and then how you made your way back to New York?
So when I was in Washington, they called them platforms back then. You had a platform. So I was a platform person. And what that meant is I would handle, I went from being a teller where I counted money and I cashed checks and dealt with everybody that came in the front door to I was opening accounts now. And being in Washington, D.C., we handled a lot of international things. I handled a lot of things. I would do international wires. I would do international exchanges because all the embassies banked with my bank. So I would have people coming in. So the diverse contacts of individuals that I had while I was there was pretty amazing, quite frankly. I did quite well, and I've always been a salesperson, and they promoted me up, and I ended up opening up a new office on the corner of 13th and Penn, which is right across the street from the FBI building. So, and the building that I was in had commercial real estate brokers, it had attorneys, it had CPAs, was filled with professionals. So I was able to really kind of capture that market, and I ended up opening up a lot of accounts, and back then they paid me for the accounts. So the more accounts I could open up, the more money I could make. So I was making very, very good money.
That's a good incentive.
Yeah, so I could, I did what I could, and people they called them cross sells. So if you open up a checking account, well, you know what, we have this credit card that we also offer, and you know what, you don't want to ever be overdrawn, so you need to have an overdraft protection on this too. So it's like ding, ding, ding. The more cross sells you had, the more money you could make. So I did pretty well. I would get at least 5 cross sells on every single account that I opened up. So I was always like the number one person in all the branches. So they would do these little celebrations, and I would be very, very successful. So my son got the chicken pox, and I didn't have any sick leave. So I didn't have anyone to take care of him. So I'm in Washington, D.C. My sisters are living in New York. My mother is living in New York. My children's grandparents are living in New York. So I don't have any help. I really have no help. So I did have a sister-in-law that lived close by, and she said, well, I'll watch Matthew so you can go off to work. First of all, I've been working full-time, and now I had to stay home because daycare throws them out with the chicken pox back then. So she says, well, I'll come watch him on Friday, and you can go at least go into the office. So I'm like, okay, great. So I get to the office on Friday morning, and my boss says to me, call your house. I'm like, oh, what's going on? That's not a good sign, call your house. So she had neglected to do her payroll, so she told me that she was going to have to go to basically a state campus kind of office complex. And she says, don't worry, I'm just going to leave him in the car. It won't take me more than 15 minutes. I said, no, you're not. I said, I will be home. So my boss said, go get him, bring him some toys. We'll set him up in the conference room. So that's what I did. I went home, set him up in the conference room. And back then, you had Fridays where you closed at 2 o'clock, and then you reopened at 5 o'clock until 7 o'clock. So it was my turn to work the 5 to 7 shift, and I had it set up that my girlfriend was going to watch the kids. So her husband was a DC cop, so he came to the office and picked Matthew up and took Matthew home with him so that I could continue my work day, and I didn't miss a work day. At that point, it kind of came to the conclusion, I don't have enough core help here. I have not enough core help, so I need to figure out what am I going to do next. So my core help was I was going to move back. I had all my sisters calling me. I would take the day off from work. I could watch your kids. I'm home with my kids. My mother was like, I would take a day off. So I wouldn't have had to lose time. So I took a step back and said, all right, I have to get a new job. So I worked for First American Bank. First American Bank was headquartered in Washington, D.C. So I knew all the people in the headquarters. And they said, well, why don't you just transfer to New York? I go, I can do that. So when I found out I could transfer from First American Bank of Washington to First American Bank of New York,
it was a no-brainer.
It was a no-brainer. So I was able to transfer, didn't lose any time, lost a little bit of money, but the cost of living is so much higher down there than it is up here. But they told me there's incentives, so I can make incentive, and I knew I could make incentive. So I settled in, and I found a house up here. The amazing thing is this is, you would think it wasn't happening in the 80s, but when I went to apply for the mortgage, they would not take, and the bank I was working for would not use my alimony or my child support to go towards my mortgage payment, which,
wow.
Yeah, which you would think that's not right, but I did get a mortgage with another bank, so it did work out. I was able to buy a house, and I started my journey in New York with my kids by myself. So
they say that it does take a village, and it's a good thing that you did have a support system around you.
I did. I absolutely did. And my mother said too, I have three sisters, and at the time, my oldest sister hadn't had a child yet, but my other sisters did, and all the kids were very close in age. And my mother said, I was yelling at one of my sister's children, and my mother said, they're never going to know which one is their mother. You all yell at them the same. I said, no, they got to figure it out. It's okay. They're fine. So the cousins were raised like brothers and sisters, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think they're still close now.
Oh, they definitely are. I think you know. Yeah, my children are very, very close to my daughter was married about 8 years ago. And,
shout out to Katie.
Yeah, and she had all of her cousins in her wedding, and one friend. And I have one cousin. I have one first cousin, Kim, and she lives in Colorado, and she's 6 months older than me. And she claimed to be the oldest bridesmaid ever because she was also in Katie's wedding. So it was kind of cool. She wanted all her cousins in her wedding. So, and they all were in her wedding. So it was kind of cool. Fun.
That's awesome. Makes for great memories.
Yes.
And speaking of that support system around you, just being in business and seeing all that you do, I've known you for a little bit of time now, but the first encounter that we had, actually being in an elevator, and I will never forget that because I asked you for help.
Yeah.
And I asked you for advice, and you didn't know who I was. You had no reason to help me at all, and you took the time out. We literally got out of the elevator, and you said, yes, let me take a look at this, and that really stuck with me. I'll never forget that. Oh. But I see that with so many other people, especially within our office, but within the community. I mean, you being on the board of a few different organizations, but the Schenectady East Rotary, being the treasurer, who is that support system for you right now? And who kind of helps you be the woman that you are in this really male-dominated industry of commercial real estate now?
So that's a good question because it's not one person. I mean, at home I have my husband who I've been married to for over 30 years.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah, so he, I go back to when we first got together. I swore when I got divorced I was never going to get married again. And there was no reason for me to get married again. I was an independent, self-sufficient woman, and that was it. And the bank was being sold, and I was going to be job eliminated. And a single mother being job eliminated, quite frankly, I was a little nervous. I was a little scared, and I was nervous and scared because I wasn't going to have health insurance for my children. There was no, the Healthy New York that is in place now, that didn't exist back then. So that meant that I would have had to pay out of pocket and not have a job for my health insurance for myself and my children. And at the time, my former husband was not paying me any child support. He left the state of Virginia, moved to Florida. I couldn't find him, and it was before you actually were able to do a lien on someone's tax return or any of that. You needed to find him. It was well before having any kind of internet or anything along those lines. So he was out of the picture completely and not paying me. And Ed and I had just started to date, and we immediately knew we were gonna, we fit. So one of our friends asked, so who's in charge between you two? And he immediately said the kids, because the kids always came first. It was Crystal, his daughter, Katie, and Matt, my two children. But we have a very close-knit, blended, unusual family. Not unusual, but that's our family. And he supports me at home, as do my children. And in the business community and out in the world beyond, you're one of my supporters. I mean, I would say anybody that is within this organization has supported me. And then I have my former girls. I mean, I have my girls from KeyBank. We are still very close, and we planned a trip to, when I had a momentous birthday. My girlfriend said, "Okay, we're going to Ireland, and pick a date." She literally cornered me at an event, and there was like 4 or 5 of us there, and all of us said we're in, and they said, "Okay, you got to know me or or her, and there were 10 of us that flew to Ireland for like
Wow.
a girls' weekend. Had a blast. But these are my girls. These are my support people, and I have a group of friends that are from the Schenectady area that we were at an event. I go to events, but one of the women said, this is such a great. It was Women's Night Out, Bellevue Women's Night Out, and we were all just enjoying all of the women that were there. And she said, I wish we could do this more often. And she goes, kind of like have a book club, but not read books. So we have the No Book Club, and we get together on we move from house to house to house, and you can't talk about books, but we read wine bottles, so it works out.
Very nice.
So
You have
oh yes, my wine, my water. This is water.
Yes. Your signature
yes,
water
my
glass.
signature water glass by Lindsay. She got that for me.
Love that. In terms of business, and you being really the number one commercial agent within Berkshire Hathaway, it's not an easy title. And I love your team approach of really bringing in others. You are the only female on that commercial division here at Berkshire Hathaway. Has that made any difference in terms of the way that you conduct business, or?
So my previous banking roles, I moved up within the banking world, and I became a commercial lender, and I moved up in the commercial lending field and became a team leader. So I had a great mentor, Bob Curley, passed away a couple of years ago. He always said, you can't do it on your own, and the more the merrier, and share the wealth. Those are some of his things that he would say. Make sure everybody on the team is pulling their weight, but if they need a little help, help them. And I've always had that kind of attitude. There's enough money out there for everybody to make money. Okay. Same with competition. There's enough competition out there. If you don't like me and I'm not your cup of tea, there's someone else that would be, and I can refer you to somebody that may work things out that may be better for you than me, because I'm very direct, I'm very honest, and I'm extremely ethical. So those three things are me, and I'm not changing any of those, no matter what my career is or no matter what area of my life I'm in. I'm going to always have those. I'm going to be direct. I'm going to be ethical, and it's kind of, you see what you get here. So I think from my standpoint, that's kind of what helps me get through, being successful, because I keep my morals and I keep my way of doing things, and it doesn't change. So I'm not going to change the way I do things because someone wants me to. If you want to work with me, then you work with me. And I have way too many listings. I can't do it by myself. I have to bring on help. And we share listings. I think I have maybe 2 listings that I don't have anyone on with me right now. Other than that, all of my listings I have a partner.
Love that you stand for that now. There's so much more that we can
I
talk
think
about,
we're out of time.
but we are out of time, so we may have to do a part 2 at some point. To wrap it up, though, where do you see yourself in a year from now?
Where do I see myself in a year from now? Doing exactly what I'm doing, and maybe mentoring a few more people. I like to mentor people, so I'll probably, I spoke right before you came in. I was speaking with another new agent that had just come on, and she's asking a bunch of questions, and I, let me know what else I can help you with. So that's kind of my way of thinking and my way of life.
Great. Well, love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
that's it.